Good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody here already. We've got Dick and Nardine, we've got Carolyn, we've got Mike and Kim, and we've got Larry. Larry Hill is in the house. Almost said Larry King. Wouldn't that be something? He's dead. Larry Hill is in the house. Greetings, everyone. I've changed the gain setting on the microphone, hoping to give you guys a little bit more volume. Looks like I might have given you a little bit too much more volume. I'm going to turn it back down a little bit. If you guys can let me know in the comments whether or not the sound quality is working for you or not, I will adjust as we go, okay? All right, so let us begin with a word of prayer, shall we? God of revelation, mere flesh and blood cannot reveal divine truth. Only your Spirit can give that. Be in my breath and voice, be in our ears and understanding, that through these words your word may be known. Amen. So this week we are celebrating our graduates in church, people graduating from pretty much anything. Doesn't have to be high school or college, it can be anything. Hello, Joyce, welcome. And the scriptures that I've chosen for this week are Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 12. If you want to take a look at those between now and Sunday morning. Paul writes, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve that God's will is his good, pleasing, and perfect will. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of us has one body with so many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer." This is the word of our Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen. All right, so folks, we are once again in a fairly new, we're only like 3-4 weeks into our new format here, where we're talking about various items in the news that relate to Christianity and to the church. They might be about Christianity and the church. They might just have an effect on Christianity or the church, or how we live our lives as Christians. I always want to also include something in there about how we can live healthy and well as Christians. So I've changed the order that I'm doing things in slightly tonight. I was going through different sources. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the biggest story for the end, and the biggest story tonight is going to be the story about conspiracy theories. But I want to start off an article from religionnews.com. I said a couple of weeks ago that Russell Moore had left his job at the Southern Baptist Convention, and the job he had was from their equivalent of the Methodist Board of Church and Society. It's their I forget what it's called, but it's the part of the Southern Baptist Convention's denominational organization that deals with public ethics, basically. And he left his job, it was assumed, due to disagreements with the rest of the denomination over former President Trump. He had been a vocal opponent of Trump felt that Trump should be held to the same moral standards that President Clinton had been held to by the Southern Baptist Convention. And he left the Southern Baptist, he's still a Southern Baptist, but he left his job with that church to go to Christianity Today, which was another evangelical group that was outspoken in its criticism of former President Trump. And it was assumed that that was the reason, but it has come to light since, according to Religion News, and they linked to a couple of letters that have been made public, that he actually left over handling of allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment within the Baptist Church. And it looks like this is shaping up to be something like the Baptist version of the what do I call it? Their version of the sexual misconduct scandals. He had a lot to say about how they've been handling it over the past 2 years. In particular, the executive committee had a lot of conversations behind closed doors that he is now bringing to light. Some pretty scandalous stuff. If what he says people said were actually true, according to him, the executive committee has handled allegations of misconduct among pastors in the denomination, much the way other denominations did back in the 50s, which is that the standard operating procedure was to, when an accusation was made against the pastor, the first thing that you wanted to do was attempt to exonerate the pastor, and the second thing you attempted to do was to discredit the person making the accusations. Of course, in 2021, that's not an appropriate way to go about doing things. You have to have real investigations and find out what actually happened. And you certainly don't want to depict the victims as being in some way the perpetrators of an offense. And according to him, that's exactly what was going on. So be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, the letters that were made public were... one of the people involved is threatening to sue over it. They were so outrageous. So that's one of the things going on in the Baptist Church today, the Southern Baptist Church. Another thing, on a more pleasant note, in the Southern Baptist Church, is my favorite Baptist pastor, Rick Warren, is apparently finally planning to retire. He founded Saddleback Church 42 years ago. Now, this is, of course, the pastor who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, which was later rebranded as What on Earth Am I Here For? He also, before that, wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Church, which I liked quite a bit as well. Both of them are still in print. He's written a couple books since then. He's done a lot of good for the Christian world, and has been very ecumenical in his approach to Protestant Christianity. Was also called upon, I believe, by President Obama to do one of the invocations. So he has been pastoring there for 42 years, one of the biggest churches in the country, and he has announced that it's time to start looking for a replacement as he looks at transitioning into a role that is not in the pulpit at Saddleback anymore. And those transitions are always very tricky. I wish them all the best. Rick, by all accounts, is a great guy. Always liked him, so I hope things go well for him in this next stage of his life. All right, what else did I want to talk about tonight? In the Methodist world, looking at uminsight.net, they're reporting that conflicts over the impending schism of the United Methodist Church are getting more severe and are getting more widespread. We had talked before about how there are separatist pastors in the United States that claim that they are being treated unfairly by their bishops. Well, now we're getting reports of the exact opposite happening elsewhere in the world, that pastors who would consider themselves loyalists, who intend to stay with the denomination, are being locked out of their buildings, either by their congregations or by their bishops, who plan to take the congregations out of the denomination, whether the pastor wants to or not. It's all very unfortunate stuff going on. You would hope that people would act with more integrity than this, and of course, not all of these accusations may turn out to be true. We don't know. Here on the state side, I suspect that some of them are close to true, some of them probably are not. But time will tell. But tension is definitely rising. It won't be until next year that the denomination puts a plan in place for the schism, assuming that it does put one in place next year for the schism. Congregations won't be voting on it under that plan until 2023. Right, things are going right now. The schism's going to be done before any of those things actually happen. And I don't know, maybe that's for the best. I don't know. Here in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, if you go to the website, you will find that there are multiple positions open right now. They are hiring for various things, 3 or 4 positions that they have open. And they also are announcing new hires already that are in place. They're not exactly new hires. They're not people who are new to Methodism, but they're people that are serving in new roles. And they all have to do with the way, I believe, starting in September, the Peninsula Delaware Conference and the Baltimore-Washington Conference will both be supervised by the same bishop until we finally get around to holding a global general conference where we can elect some new bishops and fill some of the vacancies that are coming about now. So, on health and wellness, some interesting things came out this week that are important. If any of you are diabetic, it has been discovered that lack of sleep is much more dangerous for a diabetic than it is for an average person. Those of you who are grandparents, my heart goes out to you. This is a separate thing. The average grandparent has not seen all their grandkids in person in nearly 8 months. Some of you probably much longer than that. Some of them are getting together again finally. I know that my kids have gotten to see my parents a couple times in the last couple of weeks, which is great. My parents are both fully vaccinated. Becky and I and Zoe are fully vaccinated. Holly and Nick have their first shots down. They get their second shots tomorrow. So hopefully soon they'll allow the little ones to be vaccinated as well. Then we can get all of our fears behind us. All right, now, last thing. If you or someone you love suffers from bipolar disorder and has been formally diagnosed as such, there was an article today saying that at the workplace, even routine negative interactions, like, just whatever, ordinary criticism of work or ordinary problem-solving type stuff, things like that can trigger suicidal thoughts in bipolar people. Things that most of us would just consider to be annoying or aggravating or just bother us, can have really sharp effects on people if they're bipolar or have other related mood disorders. And I only brought that up because, once again, I always want to remind everybody that everybody is carrying a lot around right now. A lot of people carry mental health diagnoses that they haven't told anybody about. So when people sort of fly off the handle unexpectedly sometimes, we need to be gracious with those people, at least in the moment, because we don't really know what's going on with them most of the time. And, I really wish people would stop posting these things on the internet. They pull out their phones and record the person having a meltdown, and then they upload it to Facebook or something. And if you were having a mental health episode, I don't think you would want somebody to do that. And I understand full well that some of these people say things that are spectacularly inappropriate when they're having a mental health episode, but that's what it means to be not criminally responsible due to mental health issues. So let's have some grace with people. We never know what troubles people are carrying around. Now, coming back around to the big thing. Conspiracy theories. One in particular, QAnon. And I've talked about it in the past, and some numbers came out a little while ago. The American Enterprise Institute had done a study, and that's a conservative think tank, and they discovered that about a third of white evangelicals more or less believed the QAnon claims. And some more numbers came out this week. A different group, PRRI Polling, dug down a lot deeper into what QAnon adherents actually believe and what percentage of the population believe them. And when I say believe, I mean if you ask them, do you believe these things to be more or less true, they would say, yes, I believe those things are true. And there are three beliefs that have sort of crystallized as the core of the QAnon worldview. And the first is the most famous of them, which is that the government and the media and the financial establishment of the United States and the world in general are all controlled by a group of Satan worshipers who are trafficking children. And so that's the core of it. And the second thing that goes with that is that they believe that there is an event coming, which they call the storm, which sounds very much like the Christian apocalyptic understanding of Judgment Day, when all of this will supposedly be exposed and all the people who will be who are guilty will be held accountable, and all of these evil structures will be brought down. And the storm, instead of Judgment Day coming with the return of Christ, the storm is coming with the return of Donald Trump, who in this worldview is going to be reinstated as president sometime in the near future. And the third tenet of their belief system is that they believe that things have gone so far off track in our country that there cannot be a resolution to it without true patriots resorting to violence. So those are the three tenets of QAnon that people were asked. Okay, people were asked these three things. Do you believe each of these three things? Okay, and so they asked them. They didn't say all three of them in one question. They said each of these three things separately. Do you believe them? Do you disbelieve them? Or are you not sure? And they found that all three of them tracked pretty closely together. In other words, if you believed one of the three, you probably believed the other two as well. They were all pretty tightly tracked. And so what we already knew was that, according to the American Enterprise Institute, a large number of white evangelicals believed all three of these things. So this study by a different group broke it down a lot deeper. And what they found was that 25% of white and Hispanic evangelicals believe all three of these things to be true. But it is not limited to that population. They looked at all the groups, and this ideology, I'll call it a cult, has caught on in virtually every denomination in some way. So in the Mormon Church, 18% believe it. Hispanic Catholics, 16% believe it. Black Protestants, 15%. Other Christian groups, 14%. Non-Christian religious groups in the country, 13%. White Catholics, 11%. And white mainline Protestant churches, 10%. Okay? So you've got a significant number in each of the religious traditions in the country that have bought into this. And what's even more alarming was, once again, those were the people that said, yes, I believe these things to be true. If you ask the question, the people who, if you look at the numbers, what percentage of people said, no, I don't believe that at all? Only two groups in the country had a majority, more than 50%, say, no, this isn't true. Atheists and Jews. Those were the only two groups where the people who said, no, there's no way this is true, were more than 50%. All of the other groups had a sizable chunk in the middle who were undecided. I find this to be profoundly alarming. When you add into that the numbers that, okay, so in our country right now, 29% of Americans believe that this last election was stolen and that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president of the United States. In QAnon, that number goes up to 73%. Okay, and I've been trying to encourage both groups of people to really listen to each other and what they're saying right now, because I know a lot of progressives who say that, and they believe this to be true when they're saying this. They believe that nobody actually believes that the election was stolen, that the people who say that the election are stolen know in their hearts that it wasn't really stolen. They're just angry, and they're saying this because they didn't get their way, and hopefully someday they'll cool off and stop talking this way. But we know they don't really believe it. And I'm here to tell you folks that I know these people, and they absolutely believe it. Okay, they absolutely believe it. In fact, many of them would say, and I know this from talking to them, that from their perspective, they think not all of them would say this, but many of them do. They would say that not only was the election stolen, but they believe that it is obvious to everyone that the election was stolen, and that the people who are insisting that it was not stolen are actually lying. That they themselves know that it was stolen, and they're lying because they support the steal, so to speak. When you've got a third of the country with an attitude like that, or approaching a third of the country, 29%, believing that we don't have a legitimate government in place, and believing that most people know this to be the case, that is a very, very unstable situation. We have got to resolve this somehow, and I can't imagine any way of resolving it that is not going to involve real open dialogue, the kinds of which we have not yet had. These two groups have really partitioned themselves. It seems like things have died down a little bit because it's not in the news as much as it was. Social media, it's not blowing up like it was, but that's just because the statistics would indicate that it is not the case that people are backing off of these extreme claims, that they're actually hunkering down. They're just not talking about it publicly anymore, which, in my opinion, is even more dangerous than before, because now we don't know what people are thinking. So once again, as the church, we have to be the calm voice in the room, the non-anxious presence. We have to stand up for truth. And we have to point out that people lie a lot. But most importantly, this QAnon ideology, it's catching on with Christians because it's stolen from Christian apocalyptic imagery. Okay, in Christianity, we talk about Judgment Day. We talk about a final judgment. We talk about the return of Christ. We talk about a vindication. We talk about all things being righted. And all of that stuff has been turned into a political apocalypse, very much like what the communists did back in the early 20th century. They did the exact same thing, except for them, instead of Judgment Day, they didn't. Instead of talking about Judgment Day or the storm, they talked about the revolution. And of course, when the revolution comes, it's going to do the same thing that QAnon is talking about, just to different people. It's going to expose all the evils that people have done. It's going to hold them accountable and so forth. Thankfully, the revolution never came here. It did come to other places. And hopefully, the storm is not coming in the way that they're envisioning it right now. I have no problem saying that. But these things have these things have a way of being self-fulfilling prophecies, It's not going to play out the way they think it's going to play out, but they might see to it that something plays out that the rest of us are not very comfortable with. So pray for our country, but once again, the solution to this is not going to be fear-mongering. The solution to this is going to have to be faith, hope, and love. There's no way through this in the long run without faith, hope, and love, establishing that we have more in common than against us, and to remind people what a great country we have for whatever problems it has. We cannot jeopardize the future of this country with talk like this. We simply can't do it. All right. Moving on to local church stuff. Received the books in the mail this week. I'm ready to hold a new member class. I've got 2 families that would like to participate in it. I'd like to get at least a 3rd family, if not a few established members who haven't been through the new class yet. So let me know if you're interested in that. I'm looking for musicians. I need guitarists. I need pianists, maybe even percussionists. We're trying to put instrumentation together for the 10 o'clock service. Please let me know if you're interested in that. ASP is coming up. We've got our tool training this coming Saturday from 10 to 1. I know that a lot of people are starting up summer jobs and stuff, and some folks might not be able to be there for the full time, but please try to be there for as much of it as you can. And those of you who are members of the Mount Zion Facebook group, you might have noticed that something is going on with the group right now, which is that I have decided to take it private. And I've got very good reasons for doing that. So we have, the way Facebook is set up, there are pages, there are profiles, and there are groups. Okay, so most people on Facebook have a profile and a wall where they post stuff. Organizations and businesses have professional pages. Okay, so I have my personal profile, I have my Pastor Steve Humphrey professional page, and the church has the Mount Zion page. And then pages can also have groups for the people who for the people who are who like that page. Okay, and then you join that group. So Mount Zion United Methodist Church has a page, which is our public face on Facebook for everybody, and then we have a group. Okay, and the group, you have to join. You have to say, hey, I want to be a part of your group. And then we have to say, yes, you can be a part of the group. And the intention of that was for the members of the church to join that group, because when we post things in that group, people who are in that group immediately receive a notification that we've put something there that they want to go and look at. Okay? It communicates much more directly and more efficiently than just when we put a post on the Facebook page. Most of us like hundreds of pages now, and we don't see all the notifications that go up when they post something. But if we're in a group, we get that notification immediately because we're in far fewer groups. All right, so the idea was that people who are in that group would be getting notifications for things that perhaps not everybody who likes our page would be interested in. There are hundreds and hundreds of people I don't know how many hundreds. There are hundreds of people in the community that like Mount Zion's Facebook page, who would not necessarily be interested in some of the things that we put in our little group. They are very interested in car shows and chicken dinners and stuff like that. So they see that stuff. But so the Facebook group was a public group, which meant that anybody could see what was going on in the group. They just couldn't participate without being admitted. Okay? And for a long time that was fine, and I thought that was great because we want people we want people who come to the page to be able to see what's going on in the group, because we don't post anything in there that's confidential. But see, here's the thing. Facebook has changed the way it's managing public groups now, okay? What they're trying to do is help people find groups that they would want to join. So you might now notice, if you're using Facebook on your phone, there's a bunch of tabs across the bottom. One's for videos, one's for groups and so forth. And when you click on groups, you will now see things in your group feed that you didn't see before. It used to be that when you went to your group feed, you only saw posts from groups that you had joined. Okay? Now you see posts from groups that you have not joined, but they think you might be interested in this one. Okay? So for example, I belong to the Monty Python fan group. Okay, so there are other comedy-based groups out there, and I get notifications of things that have just been posted in these groups, and they say, hey, since you like Monty Python, maybe you'd like this group too. Take a look at this post that they just put. So public groups, that's what's happening with them right now. So if we were to have remained a public group, that means that it wouldn't just be people coming to our page that would see what's going on, but these posts could be randomly going out to anybody in their group feeds. And I just didn't feel that the people that were in our group who were posting things, if somebody puts out, please pray for my brother, who's having surgery or whatever, you don't necessarily want somebody, out in Boise, Idaho to see that. They don't know us. So I took the group private. Once the group goes private, it cannot be made public again. We would have to start a new public group to do that. And, if somebody wants to do that at some point, there's, we certainly can. But the purpose of that would be very different. That would be, that would be a networking thing. So the public groups now are for networking, and the private groups are for their members. Okay, so that's what the function of ours has always been. So I have taken our group private. All right. Just wanted to be sure everybody understood what was going on with that. So speaking of things going on in our little group, Al Richards is home. He has not yet started this most recent round of chemotherapy, but please keep him in your prayers so he can be strong enough to do that. Karen Skank had her surgery. She's home. She's recovering. She did well with the surgery. And I talked to Tom Keller today. He was in the hospital for 3 days over the weekend. They still haven't figured out why he gets anemic like he does, but he's feeling much, much better now. His legs are healing up, and he plans to be at the men's group this week. Now, next week, we're going to have a special guest come on, and we're going to have a live interview if the technology cooperates. And the guest will be Pastor David Wentz. David Wentz is a retired pastor from our conference, and he is now living out in the Ozarks of Missouri, and he has written 2 books. One is a book called Pastoring the Nuts and the Bolts, and the other one is this book here. I just gave a copy of it to each of our confirmands on Sunday morning, The Character of a Methodist. Now, this was actually written by John Wesley originally, but it was written by Wesley in 18th century English. And it's very hard to read now. So there's a growing market for Wesley's stuff being paraphrased in modern readable English, and this had not yet been paraphrased that way. So Pastor Wentz did that for us. He has a website called doingchristianity.com, and he's going to talk to us about what he's doing with that website and stuff going on with his other book, because he's got what I think is a very neat missionary project going on with it. Of course, if you haven't got my book yet, please be sure to check it out, Spiritual Courage. I am now working on my next book. I hope to have it out in January of next year. That's probably overly optimistic, but I do want to at least have it come. I'm going to shoot for January, but certainly the first part of next year. The first book ended up taking a year longer than I expected it to. I know what I'm doing more now than I did back then, but the main challenge is still to find a time to write. If you have any questions or concerns, please put them in the comments before we wrap up tonight. After we wrap up tonight, if you liked this video, if you're watching it on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. Whether you're watching it on my personal channel or on the church's channel, you can subscribe. If you subscribe to the church's channel, that's one thing. If you subscribe to mine, that's slightly different. My channel is the one that will travel with me from church to church in the future, and the church channel obviously will not. If you're watching us on Facebook, please click like. And music on Thursday. Yes, Carolyn, we will be having music on Thursday. The Edsel Bradbury Music Jam. If you've never been, you got to come out. It's worth a drive. Even if you're not local, it's worth a drive to come out and see the Edsel Bradbury Music Jam. It's a traditional bluegrass and old country freeform jam session on Thursday nights. I always enjoy it when I'm available to do it. Anyway, if you're watching us on Facebook, don't forget to click like. And if you found this particularly meaningful, particularly the stuff about QAnon, if you know anybody that needs to see that, you can always tag them or share it to them or send it to them in a message. Don't send it to any borderline types, though. We don't have any unfortunate incidents. Alrighty. I think that's it then. So we will go ahead and I don't know how long we're going to go next week. I don't know how long the interview is going to take. I've never done this before. But hope to see you then. Let's go ahead and close with the Serenity Prayer. God, give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. All right, brothers and sisters, good night, and I'll see you next week.